Alrighty, guys. So now we're gonna get into like a little bit more of the boring stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and hit play real quick, and we're going to see what do we have. We have our bricks spawning. I never really like set mine up to go back to where they should, but there we go. Like they kind of are going off a little bit. I'll fix that in just a second because that's just we because of how we've built our game, that's really easy to fix, right? We can go over to our game manager and I don't know, let's change the spacing to 1.8, right? For the X. And then we should be able to see really, really easily like, hey, there we go. It's spawning really well. And then I can move my spawn point over so I can tweak this just a bit to make it feel really clean, really well made. But this is a game, right? We need to be having things like points and lives and stuff like that. So, the way we display that generally is with a UI, and that's a user interface. In Unity, there's two different ways of using UI. We're going to be talking about the older way for right now, because I think the newer way is mostly for if you're making apps or stuff like that. So, this UI toolkit is a little bit new. I personally haven't used it. I'm kind of excited to get into it. But what we're going to do is just use the regular old UI system. Now, the UI system takes a bit to wrap your head around because it works very differently than what we've been messing around with. I shouldn't say very differently. It starts from a different point of view. So we're gonna go hit UI, and the first thing to know about UI in Unity is the everything starts in a canvas, right? So I'm gonna go to UI. I'm gonna go to canvas, and you'll notice two things got made. Our canvas makes sense. We just made that, and an event system. The event system, your canvas, let's say it has buttons or input fields or stuff like that, will not work without an event system. Now, this game as it stands right now doesn't need any buttons, but it will by the end. If we go to our canvas, we can see that there's a couple things that looks a little different, right? We have a rect transform, a canvas scaler, and a graphic raycaster. Um, a canvas is still a game object. An event system is still a game object. Um, but one thing that you'll notice is every other game object has something called a transform. We used it a couple times. That's its position, rotation, and scale. A canvas has a rect transform. And we talked about this, how like every script we make is a mono behavior, and every mono behavior is is a behavior, and every behavior is a component, and blah 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 blah. You know, it keeps going all the way up. Rect transform is still a transform. It's just derived from transform. This is inheritance and polymorphism, all those cool CSE words. Um, with our canvas selected, one thing we are going to change right away is this constant pixel size. If I go ahead and don't follow along with this just yet, I'm going to go ahead and make an image here at the for my screen, and you'll notice as I make my screen bigger or smaller, if I keep my canvas on constant pixel size, it will keep the square that was just made a constant pixel size. It will not scale with my screen, which is not what we want, right? We want, if somebody's playing on a 4K screen or a 1920 by 1080 or a really low resolution screen, we want our canvas to be scale with screen size. Now, reference resolution, there's not really a right answer for it, but you can see right here that it's by default set to 800 by 600. I tend to do the most common resolution, which is 1920 by 1080. Alrighty, so we have our image. We did our scale with screen size. We picked 1920 by 1080 because it's the most common screen resolution. And I'm sorry, it's early here. You might hear the goobers barking in the background. They're playing a little bit, so I do apologize for that. What was I gonna say? Oh, so we don't really need this image, right? But we will see now that it keeps its size across screens. This is very important on things like mobile apps, stuff like that. So if we want to start keeping track of score, if we want to start keeping track of how many balls we have, we're gonna need text boxes, right? So I'm going to right click, go back to UI. Now, we talked about this a little bit, that like when we put something under another object, it's called childing it to the object. Every UI element we make needs to be childed to the canvas, okay? So when we go and create another UI object, we're not going to right click in the empty, we're going to right click on our canvas. And if I do that, right click, go to UI, we should be able to see that we have text/text mesh pro. That's the one we want. Now, the first time you use a text object, a text mesh pro object in Unity, you're going to get this pop-up. You want to import TMP essentials. You don't need this examples and extras. The reason, and this is one thing that I've always really liked about Unity, is if Unity's text used to be garbage, right? It used to get really blurry, used to not look very good. There was an asset made and sold on the Unity Asset Store called Text Mesh Pro. It was so good and so widely used, Unity just bought it and said, you know what, guys, you did great. Let's take it, we'll ship it with the engine, and that's what we have right here. So with this, we see our text in the middle, we could say, whoa, we got points, you know, I can spell. Or we can leave it blank. And you'll see all the normal things over here that you would have with a text object, right? You have your alignment. Let me just put test text in here. You have your alignment, you have your text wrapping, overflow, bold, italics, underline, all the things that you're used to. What you're not used to is this guy up in the top left corner, okay? What this is where on the screen should the object be anchored to? Where should it stick, right? For our text, I want us to click on the little target dude and press Alt and Shift, and put it in the top right corner. That means it's going to snap, set its pivot, set every, truly anchor itself to our top left corner, because that's where I want my score to be. If you want yours in the top right corner or the bottom corner or whatever, feel free to go ahead and do that. Now, if I look over in my scene, I don't see my text. And this is where, when I said the UI works quite a bit differently, I'm going to double click the text so we can center in on it. It took me way further away from the game. And that's because the canvas is kind of a big object floating above your game. When you're working with a lot of UI elements, it gets a little tricky because the canvas, if it was right on top, it'd be hard to line it all up and whatnot. And this is why I really like having this setup here, right? So I have my game view here. I can see where my text is. And if I go and move it, I can put it exactly where I want. Now, one common thing with text boxes, I'm going to press the T key on my keyboard so I can get this rect tool. And you can just click on it as well, but the rect tool is generally how you want to scale UI objects. There are two parts to a text box. There's the box itself, if I'm going to grab the blue orb to go ahead and scale it, or there's this yellow box. The yellow box is kind of your margins, right? Generally, you're not going to want to mess with that too much. I'd rather put my box to the left here a little bit and do it that way. You could, let me undo that, scale it up, and use your margins to get this as well. But to me, it works a little bit better just to put the box where I want it, right? So I have my box. I'm going to get another one because at some point we're going to have to destroy the ball and have lives. So I'm going to do the same thing and pin it to the right. And I'm going to move it over a bit. And if I were making this and actually selling it, I would want to perfectly line it up. But for right now, I'm not going to worry about that. There we go. We have our text boxes. Now, we need to actually make these work, right? Let's go over to our game manager. Because game manager, I hadn't opened up Visual Studio. Game manager is really, really good for things like setting things up and also saying when you win and lose the game. And that's kind of the next part that we're going to get into is let's win and lose and get all that stuff cooking. And the way, whenever you're working on a game, My 2 cents is, I'm looking over here waiting for Visual Studio to open. It won't let me drag it over. My 2 cents is always figure out what your win condition is, figure out what your lose condition is. So in Brick Breaker, hello Visual Studio, thanks for the update. The lose condition is we've lost our balls, right? I'm going to go ahead and say, in order to do that, we need to know how many we have. And if we're just keeping track of a number, the best variable to potentially do that with is an int. So I'm going to say lives. And if we want to win, we probably need a score that is set up, not spawn speed. We're probably going to need a score, right? Now, we have lives, we have score. Not a float, whoops. We're going to keep that as an int as well. So we have our lives, we have our score. Now, the next thing that I think we're going to do is set up our... I think we need another int for score cap. Like, how high can our score go? What gets us to... What is, like, we're going to keep incrementing our score. What does it need to reach in order for us to win the game, right? And we can really easily figure that out by looking at this for loop. Well, we could say our score cap, we're going to add to it every time we instantiate a brick. We know that in order to win the game, we have to destroy all the bricks, right? So how many points do we want each brick to be worth? Just because it's a solid number, it just is like one of those good game feel numbers, I'm going to say 100. So no matter how many bricks, I could make this 20 bricks, or this we're going to have 6 columns. Our score cap will always be the right amount. Now, you don't have to do it this way. You could just say 10 times 4 is 40. It's too early for math. Times 100, that's 4,000, right? So I can go right in that my score cap is 4,000. Or I can just do it this way and it'll do it for me. Now, when we hit a brick, and this might seem a little weird that we're going to do this, we're going to want to increase score. So we're going to make a function that says, let's increase the score. You might be thinking to yourself, but why don't we just do that in the brick instance, right? Why don't we just say, hey, brick instance, go and add points? Well, let's go ahead and actually go over and do that, right? Because that's not wrong, but how do we go about doing it? Brick instance is going to say, we're going to add points. Well, our points are currently being tracked in our game manager. Now, if all the bricks were in the game to start, we could say serialize field, private, game manager, and we could drag in the game manager. Just say, hey, here it goes. But our bricks aren't in the game to start, so we can't do that, right? But what we can do is we can go find the game manager, right? So what I can do is say find first object by type game manager, and then I could say, well, score, I can't access my score. And this is the first time that we're actually going to be able to see the difference between a public and a private variable in code, right? If I were to go and make score public, I'd be able to access score. And in a small game, that might not be a bad thing, right? We might be able to go make it public, but it's good practice to keep things private and have game manager control how score is being affected. It's this concept called inversion of control. The brick really shouldn't be messing around with any of game manager's variables, but it can tell it, hey, increase score. Okay. So what it's going to do is it's going to find the first object in our hierarchy that has a game manager script on it. And in this case, it's our game manager right here, right? So, and then it's going to do increase score. And we can really easily just here say score plus equals 100. Now, this plus equals might be a little bit confusing, right? Because it's like, why don't we just use plus? Plus says for right this second, right in this line of code and all the ones between the chapters, we're going to add 100 to it. But it doesn't actually assign it to the variable, okay? So the equals is what actually says, hey, you're going to assign it. You're going to keep the fact that you have added 100. Now, we've already done the, how do we check things, right? So we can say if score equals score cap. I'm just going to debug.log. You won the You won the game. Very cool. Let's see. And I actually don't like this. I don't like this at all. These 100s are bad. They're what we call magic numbers. So, magic numbers are just, I'm making a variable, brain's going in two different directions here. I'm making a variable up here called brick value, right? And brick value, I'm going to replace it, the 100s, with brick value. You very, very rarely, for loops, even this 10 and 4, I'm not a fan of, but we're going to keep it. Magic numbers are just random numbers that don't mean anything in your code. And they're not. I just realized something else, and we'll talk about it in a second. And we're not supposed to be using those. They're just bad. When another programmer looks at your code, the magic numbers are generally looked down upon because they are arbitrary. They don't mean anything. Where brick value tells you, we're adding 100 because that's how much our bricks are worth. Now, what I don't like is all these variables are private. And I said in one of the earlier videos that private variables should be lowercase. The P here, they should be camel case, I'm sorry. Which means small first letter, and if you have another word, then uppercase. So instead of going and just changing this, I'm going to right click on them and rename them. So this is going to become brick prefab. And you'll notice that by using rename, it is changing it throughout. This is something that I'm really, really bad at. I always forget to make things camel case. In my classes, definitely check to make sure that I'm not taking points off for this. I know some teachers in our department and in our university in general do, but for me, I generally don't. Depends on the mood, and that's kind of reflective of where you're working, right? Sometimes people will be like, change your variable names, make them fit. I have had a job, the last place I worked was very, very picky about it, and I had to go back and change variable names all the time. So the one thing that does goof up though is if you change your variable names, your values disappear over here. So let's go ahead and reapply these things real quick. Our spacing was 1.8. The Y, I believe, was 1. My spawn point is going to get dragged in here. My brick prefab was down here. My lives, we haven't done anything with lives yet, but I'm going to set it to 3. I'm going to set our score. Well, I'm not going to set our score. I'm not going to set our score cap. I'm going to set my brick value to 100. Now, once we know score and score cap are working, these really don't need to have that serialized field in here, right? Because we've already, we don't want to be tweaking these here. And designers might come in and say, oh yeah, no, I need to tweak them. But we don't want that. Let's go ahead and run it and let's see if it's working. Because we should always start making sure things are working before we get too much stuff going. Okay, it's 600. Our score cap is 4,000. It's looking great. Now, it's going to take a while for me to win, so I'm just going to make our score 39. Oh no. And it just hit 4,000, and it said we won the game. So now we didn't break all the bricks, obviously, but we did get things working here. Now, in a more complex game, I would probably have another script, a UI manager of some sorts, to take care of our UI. But I think it's okay for us to do it in Game Manager here. Now, what a good way of kind of breaking things down. Actually, I'm going to go take the serialized field off of. I would suggest you take the serialized field off of score and score cap, but I'm going to keep it just so that we can keep looking at it, right? You can keep it. It's not the end of the world if you keep it all the way through. One of the things, we need to update this text box, right? One of the things you might be thinking, how do I get a hold of the text box in Unity? Well, if I go look at it, what do we want to update here? We want to edit. We don't want to edit the rect transform. We don't want to edit the canvas renderer. We want to edit the text Mesh Pro text UI. So if I go over to Unity, or to our code, and just start typing in private text mesh. Okay, well there's Text Mesh Pro, there's Text Mesh Pro UGUI. That didn't really work. Sometimes you have to Google it. Sometimes you have to say, oh, how do I do these things? I'm going to tell you right now, as soon as you press enter on that Text Mesh Pro, it's going to add a using TM Pro up at the top. But if you didn't get that, you would just say using TM Pro semicolon. This gives us all the different pieces of Text Mesh Pro, just like how when we were in our input system, we got all the pieces of input system. We want all the pieces of Text Mesh Pro. And it's something that will become second nature over time. So now if I do private text, we could scroll through here. You see text, text alignment, I'm going to cheat because I've been doing this for a long time. We're going to want TMP underscore text. That is what that element is. And we're going to say score text. I did it again. Score text box. And I'm going to slap the serialized field in front of it as well, so that we can edit it and just drag it in, right? Because if we were to do that find first, it's going to find the first, but we're also going to want to do, and that would be our score text, but there isn't a find second, find third, find fourth. So we're going to copy this, and we're going to also do lives text box. And I know this video was marked, I'll name it something different. We'll do text and winning and losing. Okay, so there's our lives text box. So now every time we score, we want to update our score text box. And that's really easy to do. We could say score text box dot text equals, we're going to put it in quotes, score colon plus, not score cap, just score. So what this is saying, this is what we call concatenating strings, right? We're taking a string that we're writing and we're adding to it. We're adding a number. And that isn't like adding like math, it's just sticking the number to the end. And if score equals score cap, we're gonna, I deleted the print, but let's just see if this is working, right? One bit at a time. Cool. I'm going to hit play, and right out the gate, I'm getting an error. The bricks aren't breaking. That's a bit of a problem. What's the error? What's the error? What's the error? Increase score. We never assigned the score text box. And this is a very important error. It's one of the most common ones that you're going to see. It's a null reference exception. And you'll notice we were messing with the text box. Well, why aren't the bricks destroying them? It's because one error can cause a cascade of issues. So you always want to try and resolve your errors as quickly as possible. So, score text box, it's because it's null refing because we didn't ever drag anything into here. Now, I'm going to rename this object in here. I'm going to call it score text box. And I'm going to call this one lives text box. And I did that by pressing F2 on my keyboard. It's a little hotkey to go and edit names of things. And I'm going to drag them in to their appropriate boxes. Now, technically we weren't getting an error with lives text box, but still wanted to get it done, right? All right, let's try it now. And right out the gate, there we go. We have our score in the top left corner. Very, very cool. Now, we do need to make our ball destroy and our lives text box to like actually say something. So in start, I'm going to say lives text box equals, or sorry, dot text equals lives plus lives. Kind of similar to what we did with the score, right? But we haven't done anything to say lose life. Now, let's go to our ball controller. We haven't really done much with it in a second, but we know when the ball hits the bottom of the field that it should destroy. And we've done, if we look at our brick, we've done on collision enter. So I'm just going to copy this over. But we don't want to check to see if it hits ball controller. And in fact, we don't really want to be doing this get component at all. We could make another script that says ball destroyer and do a get component and see like, well, if this thing is got a ball destroyer script on it, destroy the ball. But I want to show a different way of doing things. We're still going to get our collision. We're still going to get our game object, but we're going to use something called tags. And we're going to say, we're going to say if it hits something with a tag called killbox, we're going to find the game manager and we're going to lose a life because I wrote this empty function right now called lose life in our game manager. And then we're going to destroy the ball. Now, what is this tag thing? We haven't really talked about those. And they're, for quick things, very, very useful. Not something that I would do all the time, but I think is pretty powerful tool. So let's go over. We know that the southern square, this bottom one, is the one that we want to destroy the ball. Now, if we look over in the inspector, we have the name. I'm going to name it killbox as well, just so that way then it's not square 1, 2, 3, and 4. But right underneath the name, we have a tag system. Okay? I'm going to hit add tag. And I'm going to say killbox, exactly the way I spelt it in the code. And I can't remember if I capitalized the B or not. I did. So let's go and remove that and say killbox. Excellent. Now, this does not apply the tag. If I go back over, we'll notice that it still is untagged. I'm going to go ahead and name it killbox. Now, this is just like a quick way you can tag things enemies or tag things players or collectibles and use this as a quick comparison method because this killbox tag will never change. And I'm going to actually just say southern box there. Because the tag in the name can get, you know, I don't want that getting confused because we're checking the tag. So now if the ball hits the southern box down here, tagged killbox, we lose the ball. Now, didn't make our lives go down. And now we don't have a game. Let's go ahead and add some stuff to lose life. Well, we're going to want to say lives minus minus, or minus equals 1. It means the same thing, right? And then this won't by default update the text because we're only updating it this one time in start. We could, in update, throw this line, right? because then every frame it's going to be updating. But that's really, really gross. We don't want that. Why? We only need to update it when we lose a life. Update is something that like you should use very, very sparingly, because as soon as you start having a lot of code running in update, it starts to get very messy and hard to debug. So we have lives text box, text equals lives, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? And now I think we have a game. Well, if lives equals 0, then we lose game. And if here we have win game. I think now we have something that works pretty good, except one thing. We don't actually respawn the ball, which is a problem. Let's go ahead and fix that. In our game manager, we spawn our bricks. We also probably want to spawn our ball back in. So if we lose life and our lives equal 0, we lose game, but else, and this is one of the first times in our ifs that we could actually go ahead and use that else, we're going to instantiate the ball prefab again. And I'm going to just say vector 2.0 because I feel like that might work well for us. Put it right in the center of the screen, and then see what happens. I go over to my game manager. There's my ball prefab. I'm going to drag the ball in. Let's see what happens. Ooh, it's going, it's going. That was crazy. That was very fast. I'm going to pause the video for just 1 second. I think the best way to go about making this game a little bit more fun is we need a win screen, we need a lose screen, and I think we should be able to fire the ball. It doesn't just go off right at the start. So, in the next video, we're going to get the ball following the paddle. We're going to get our win screen, get our lose screen, and then wrap up Brick Breaker. So, I think this video has gone on long enough, and I'll see you in the next one.